has just started. So my name is Rosie McEachen, and I'm the director of the UK Population Health Improvement Healthy Urban Places Consortium. Our consortium is all about trying to find ways about how we can harness the power of the places we live as tools for population health. And we are a big team covering a range of institutions and work with a great team of researchers. But we're keen to not only learn from the work that we've been doing in our consortium, but also to learn from other experts in the area. So we we'll be holding a series of seminars for the Healthy Urban Places Consortium, and we are very delighted that Professor Clive Sabel has agreed to be our guinea pig and to present for the first of these seminar series. So these are going to be relatively informal. We're going to ask our speakers to speak for about 30 minutes, and then there'll be lots of time for question and discussions afterwards. Just to let you all know that we will be recording this talk today and the questions afterwards, and we'll be putting that on our website so that for those of you who weren't able to make it today, you'll have a chance to catch up later. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Clive. So Professor Clive Sabel is an urban spatial data scientist, and you've just returned back to the UK, Clive, from 8 years in Denmark, where you were working on the amazing Bertha project. So this was a big data project based in Denmark. Previous to that, you've worked in various institutions in England, so Bristol and Exeter, to name a couple. You've got a very impressive track record of peer-reviewed publications, really relevant to the work we're doing. And you've also got a range of collaborations across Europe, China, Japan, and New Zealand. So we're really interested to hear a bit more about your work. Before I hand over to you, I just wanted to say to everyone, I first met Clive when he was giving us a proper grilling on one of our EU projects, and I thought, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I collared him soon after and asked if you'd come and present to the consortium. So this is just my way of getting you back, Clive. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to you now, Clive, to take us through your presentation, which is around use of sensors and spatial big data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rosie, for that lovely introduction. Can you all confirm you can hear me fine? Yeah, lovely.
Perfect.
I will just share my screen. And if I maximize that. Yeah, can you see my full screen now?
We can see lots of different slides, so you might need to put us on slideshow.
Yeah, I did that, but okay, I've shared the wrong.
Oh, that's it. That's brilliant. We've got you now.
You've got it, but I don't. Okay, but you can see my first screen, my first slide, can you? This is
Yeah.
I'll never be able to transition. Has that gone back to all of the slides?
You're back to the slide now. Yeah.
Right, how to fix this problem? If I stop sharing. Okay, that is like that. That is like that. If I share again. I don't have the option of sharing the maximize screen. Okay, what are you looking at now?
We've got the sort of full slide set there, Clive.
Right, and now it should be a bit of a delay, but I've hit the slideshow. Come on, let's do it. Right now, do you see it all?
Yes.
Okay, we're good. So we're good to go?
Amazing, great. I did say you were a guinea pig.
I'm not really a professor. I don't do this every day. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Rosie, for the lovely introduction. I'm Clive Sabel, as Rosie said, and today I'm going to try and talk to you hopefully as I said, in a very relaxed and informal way. So I normally offer the chance to people to interrupt me as I talk, but perhaps due to the format, let's take the questions at the end, but there should be plenty of time for discussion, I hope. So I want to talk about the work that I've just finished doing in Denmark, working at Bertha, the Big Data Center for Environment and Health, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But the title of the talk is trying to understand how people respond to their urban environments. And we're doing that, and we're trying to do that through some innovative sets of sensors that we give them. Before I move on, you can see my contact details in the bottom there. Please feel free to contact me if you want to. But I do have to acknowledge my co-author. In fact, it's more than a co-author. This is was her PhD. So Jiaoxi Jiang I'm greatly indebted to. And the two studies that I'm going to talk about throughout here are her PhD. She graduated in 2023 and now works at New York University in the States. So very briefly, just wanted to introduce myself. My research focus tries to harness the power of spatial big data and technology to help us understand how we live, how we work, and indeed how we play. So I like following people. I like following them digitally, not stalking them, hopefully. And I do that in using this concept called life course environmental exposure. And this slide that you can see here, I like to talk about for a few minutes because it tries to encapsulate everything about the work that me and my team do. So you'll see a red line through the middle there, and that's meant to represent the whole life course concept, where we look at events from, in fact, pre-birth through the whole life until later life. And we're interested in the whole gamut of environment. I define the environment very, very broadly, not just to include physical things. I'm by training a social geographer, so I'm particularly interested in other things, but let's start with physical. So we're interested in the obvious stuff, like how does air pollution impact our health across the life course? We're interested particularly in the indoor environment as well as the outdoor environments. We're interested in things like green and blue space and exposure to green and blue space. So we're interested in good and bad things. We're interested in how wildlife makes us feel better, perhaps, or how forests recuperate us. We're also interested in how industry and transport potentially can cause ill health. But I think the interesting space that we're looking at in the top right-hand corner of the image is focusing on our social environments. That's where we live, what our neighborhoods are like, where we live, who we know, who our friends are, what social capital we have, and how do we measure that? And then increasingly, with a nod towards particularly my children and that generation, we do quite a bit of work now trying to assess the impact of the virtual environment on social relationships. So that's the top right-hand corner. So moving on, I want to just very, very briefly tell you about Bertha. So Bertha is Denmark's big data center for environment and health. I founded it. We were very lucky to got a lot of money from the Novo Nordisk Foundation in Denmark. It finishes this year. Well, the funding finishes this year, so it's been a 7 or 8 year project. It's more than a project. It employs about 50 people, including PhD students, and in fact, PhD training was one of the big functions of what we were trying to do. So the centre's aim was to combine big data in health, environment, and official government registers in Denmark, and with personalized sensors, and to use citizen science to help us understand the complex interactions between environmental exposures and human health across the life course. And a major focus of that, of relevance for today, is that we were focusing on mental health. And we have methods that you would imagine that we use, like exploratory data science, machine learning, big data linkage, and environmental exposure modeling. Let's move on. Now you had a sense of what Bertha is about. And here's our website. You can just Google Bertha in Denmark and you'll find this and you can see lots of videos about what we're trying to do and what we've ended up doing there and our publications. So now let's move directly to the research talk that I want to give you today. So some of our earlier work was very interesting and found some results around how geography negatively impacts people's mental health. And here's a paper that I'll give the reference in, I think, on the next slide, by another one of my PhD students, Karen Chen, who found in a nationwide study that there were higher rates of depression in suburbs, I'm paraphrasing, but in suburbs compared to inner cities. And this got a lot of media attention. As you can see, it's picked up by The Guardian, amongst others. And this is a summary of her work. There's one of the references to this if you're interested in reading more about this. But essentially what we found was, well, I can interpret the maps for you. The purple areas are the inner city high density areas. And Karen found the areas that we see highlighted in black polygons, the suburbs, had a much higher rates of depression than either rural areas or inner city areas. And that led us to question, okay, so that's in Denmark, where the areas, the neighborhoods that seem to be causing higher rates of depression. But can we do the opposite? Can we design a set of experiments that help us identify areas that recuperate our mental health, that are good for us? So that's where our thinking shifted. Of course, we kept both streams going along at the same time. And so I employed Jiao Shi. Jiao Shi was and is a qualified architect, and she was keen on doing a data science PhD on top of that. So she started thinking and persuading me around how do we study health promoting environments. And here's an image, a typical UK image of what might look like a nice area. It's all very subjective, and we'll come to that in a minute. And then we also thought, well, how do we measure these health recuperative areas? So within Bertha, we have a piece of work, a large piece of work, building health and exposure sensors, small ones that can be held on people's arms or backs. It's very much a citizen science project, so we could get lots of citizens involved. Nearly all of our sensors are GPS enabled, so we know where people are when they're walking around cities. Linked very closely to this is we did some app development work. So it's not just sensors in terms of what you would think of as sensor, but we also developed apps to help us understand what people were thinking, because that's the hard part. And this sits more formally in Bertha within a piece of work where Bertha has a lot of sensors. We have sensors that are personal, but not all of them are personal. As you can see there, if you recognize it, that's the Google Street View in the top, sorry, the Street View car, in the top left-hand image. And we worked with Google to sensorize their car with our air pollution sensor. And indeed, if you're very, very smart, you can see that the car on the right is the same car as the car on the left. So after Google wanted to get rid of the car, we bought it off them and kept it going. So we have a lot of air pollution data from mobile data from cars driving around Denmark. But that really wasn't the focus of what I wanted to talk about today, because today I wanted to really talk about sensorizing people and understanding what people are thinking as they're moving around urban space. And so if you look at the image in the bottom center called the Empatica, it looks like a wristwatch, but it's not. It's a sensor that can help us understand how stressed a person is in any particular environment, always urban environments for us, at a very instantaneous moment. So it's got a very fast response. And it does this in two main ways. It measures our, well, in lay language, our sweat on our skin conductivity, which works in very much the same way as the archetypal lie detectors that perhaps America used to use. And secondly, it measures our cardiovascular response to what people are looking at and experiencing. So that's the key sensor for the rest of this talk. Before I move on, I want to just have a quick nod to the fact that we use quite a lot of machine learning in our work. And this is, you probably recognize that this is New York, it's American images. But what we try to do is, and I'll go through the sensor package in a minute, but we use cameras to understand what people are looking at. And what we found is, of course, that generates hundreds of thousands, if not millions of images, is that we could use machine learning to automatically classify what people are looking at. And in these images that you see moving around in front of us that are very distracting for me, you can see that it's identifying cars and buses and people and traffic lights. And we use that concept to automatically classify the images that people gave us in their field studies. You'll see that in a minute. So here's the combined sensor package that Jiaoxi assembled for her PhD. And her PhD was called Measuring Human Psychological Stress Response to Urban Settings Using Wearable Sensors. So if we look down the left-hand side, we see the Empatica wristwatch that I just told you about. There's a GPS. We bought our own GPSs. We didn't want to rely on individuals' smartphones. We wanted to control everything as much as possible. And we also gave everybody a video camera. It's a tiny little video camera. You might be able to see there's Jiaoxi in the left-hand side there. She's wearing it around her neck. So it's not much bigger than a large coin. But it's very, very good quality and it works very, very well. Both Empatica and the camera have data storage on board so that we could download after participants had finished their studies. Okay. And just in a little bit more detail, here's the device package. I just want to add to this package that I'll talk about two locations in a minute, Copenhagen and Salzburg, where we did our field work. In Salzburg, Jiaoxi added a chest strap, which you can see in number 4 at the bottom here, which recorded an electrocardiogram of the participants, a little bit more sophisticated than just using the wristwatch. And also in Salzburg, she added an e-diary for people to record their momentary, so that's instantaneous, mood when just after they were in a location, because we found that in the first study in Copenhagen that I'll tell you about in a minute, that it was very important to get a participant's judgment of what they were thinking to validate what the sensors were telling them. So let's moving on. So recruitment was very, very difficult. It was right in the worst time of COVID. And of course, we've all struggled with this throughout our work over the last few years. So the fieldwork was conducted in 2 locations, in Copenhagen, Denmark, and Salzburg in Austria in 2021. We managed to get 86 participants in Copenhagen and 26 in Salzburg. Salzburg was a particular disaster because she just started her data collection when the country went into a full lockdown and she had to stop completely. But we published a paper on the 26th. And you get an idea with the images on the right hand side, the setup for the Salzburg design. She visited different locations. You can see on the map there. It's different kinds of locations, from a botanic garden through to, well, if you know Salzburg, there's a river right the way through it, through a more crowded area, and an area that was high in traffic flow. We were very careful to design a participant guide for both locations. This is the Salzburg participant guide. So we gave them a map, as you can see here, with, in this case, 4 locations. We briefed the participants on what that we expected of them. We expected people to stay for Salzburg for 20 minutes in each location, where the first 5 minutes was a rest to try and equalize any external influences, like just to lower your blood pressure, just to calm everybody down. And then there was a 15-minute walk in each location. And we gave them a guide, you can see in the bottom there, quite specific guide to try and remove as many external influences as we could. So, for example, we didn't want people to eat or drink, or only drink water, no stimuli like caffeine or alcohol. We didn't want people to be on their phone when they were doing the experiment, so that, for obvious reasons. We didn't want people to interact with others, and we were careful to choose people that were not on medication that might influence our results. If they were, that nothing in the previous 24 hours. That's quite tricky. There's a whole conversation about that later on. So let's move a little bit and introduce the Copenhagen study. This is inner city Copenhagen. Copenhagen's a city of over 1 million, a large city, and we asked people to move between, as you can see, 6 sites. I actually did the Copenhagen study myself, so I was one of the participants. It was actually quite strenuous. It took 4 hours, and we, as you heard, that we tried to be in each location for 15 minutes with 5-minute breaks and then a walk between them. So area number 1 was around a well-known lake. Area number 2 is a very busy traffic interchange. Area number 3 is a botanic garden. Area 4 is the big commercial shopping area. Area 5 is the area of the Parliament. It's quite busy with quite a lot of traffic. And finally, area 6, across the water there, is a residential area. So we tried within a transect walking to get a number of different environments. And you can see there we've got the Copenhagen guide, which is very similar to the Salzburg one that I've just gone through. And in the right-hand side, you can see that we did a post survey to understand how people were feeling in each location. But we replaced that in Salzburg with the e-diary, which we think was a better way of doing it. The Salzburg diary, as I've said, uses a slightly different set of devices, but these are the locations, the 4 locations, as you can see there. It's moving from a park to the city centre to a busy streets with lots of traffic in it, to a residential area. Okay. I did think it was worth putting on this one slide that just talks about the health data tracker, the wristwatch, a little bit more. There are a number of these on the market. There are newer ones that have been released since we've done our work, but most of them would include an accelerometer to understand, help us understand how people are moving, if they're moving or if they're stationary, and if they are moving, how fast they're moving. But it also records the skin temperature, the electrodermal activity, that's the sweat response on the skin, and it measures some different ones measure different cardiovascular things. In this case, this one measured the pulse. I also, it's quite complex. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes explaining about what we were measuring with the cameras. So these are images from the cameras. So these are videos, so it's multiple frames per second. So we use machine learning to classify the visual crowdedness of an image. So in the left-hand image there, you can see the number of people in an image at any one time. So the hypothesis was that a very crowded environment might be stressful to some people. And then on the right-hand side, we're looking at a concept called visual complexity. So how complex the image is, and we analyze that in the next slide. You can see, and here's a couple of slides from our work. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see a static image from the video. This is some of our real data. And in the right-hand side, you'll see how we've classified it using machine learning. And you can see that the categories that we've got there, obviously trees and American language, but sidewalk pavement is dominant there, but also buildings are quite dominant in the bottom one. Okay. So you also might have questions, so I put an extra slide in about how we actually measured the psychological stress responses, because we've got this device. So we used an algorithm that looked at the galvanic skin response, the sweat response, and the skin temperature to classify whether a person, just binary classification, whether they were stressed or not stressed at that particular moment. And I think, I can't remember the interval, I think it was on here. It was within about every 5 seconds. So it was quite a responsive measurement. And then we had to link that, of course, to the images that people were looking at that time, and also the GPS to see if they were moving and how they were moving. A little bit further on the crowdedness of the images. So you can see here, these are some real images of ours, and we just used, it's quite easy to do image classification now using neural networks. It's still, Xiaoxi did a great job, but it's not like it used to be 20 years ago. So these are screenshots from our videos, and you can see that her algorithms have identified people, and then she took that and inputted that into her model. So I want to get, before we run out of time, onto the results. Sorry, I've set that up, but it's taken ages to explain how we did things. It's quite complicated. So in Denmark, do you remember there were 6 areas that we went through, from on the left of the screen, in the lake, through to the botanic gardens and the shopping area, the residential area that was at the end, and then the busy transportation interchange and the high traffic areas. And we did a couple of geographical techniques called, in this one, it was the Gettysord GI star to try and look for hot spots of where people were more stressed. And the way to interpret this is the red areas are small geographies, very micro geographies of someone's trying to come in. Wait a minute, excuse me. I'm so sorry. They wanted to kick me out of the hotel. So where was I? So I was looking at where the hotspots of where hotspots are in the city, where people are stressed in aggregate, from in this case all of our 86 participants. And you can see some really interesting things. So you can see, for example, in the Botanic Gardens, that there are areas where people were particularly stressed, and we thought that that would be a rather recuperative environment. It's a really beautiful Botanic Gardens. And I'll perhaps come back to that in the questions about why, because we think we have a theory. But an area like a lake here is very calming. There's not much red around it, whereas the busy transport interchange has got a lot of stressful environments, as indeed does the shopping one. I go on to a different kind of analysis. This is geographically weighted regression with the same data in the same place in Copenhagen, revealing similar kind of results. And we realized that we were working at a very micro scale. So if people were looking at a tree or a building, as you can see from some of these images, that was the kind of effect that we were analyzing. So it was quite complicated. I mean, if you like, it was proving the obvious that if you're looking at a tree, it's good for you. And if you're looking at a busy street or a boring wall, like you can see in the bottom of the screen, that wasn't good for you. But we found a lot more complexity around that. We'll come back to that at the end. And then in Salzburg, we found similar kinds of things. I just extracted this slide. First of all, if you were interested in reading more about that study, there's the reference to that one at the bottom. Here we're just analysing crowdedness, measures of crowdedness, and what overcrowding meant for people's stress. And you can see again in red the areas where people were more stressed compared to the blue areas where people were less stressed. And you can see it's quite a microgeography again. It's at least street block level variation. Okay. So the work that we're trying to do, and I've got a couple more slides, I know I'm sort of just running out of time now. What we tried to do is we're going to try and take that evidence, and as I said, Joshi is an architect, to inform urban design strategies to encourage the design of more livable urban environments. Okay. So that's the concept of it. Taking this evidence through to the planning and architecture disciplines to say this is how people respond to different environments. Okay. And then in our last slide, I've just put a few things together. These are things that we might want to discuss now, but I'd like to say, obviously, this is highly experimental methodology. We're interested in what you think about how we designed this. We became aware, and I think this is crucial, that the same person responds differently to different urban environments. And that's obvious, right? So if I might like a park, and I might respond positively to that, and I might not like an overcrowded area. But other people, the next point, might do the opposite. And if I come back to that point I was making in the Botanic Gardens in Copenhagen, when we asked people, and we did the post questionnaire survey, for example, a parent with a young child might obviously get stressed if their child was very close to the water in the middle of the Botanic Garden. So there's nuance around, it's not just Botanic Garden good, busy street bad that we recognise. Whereas I, looking at the lake, might have had a very positive response to the lake. We are aware that responses even vary over time. So the same person can respond differently as time progresses, and if they repeat the same visits, there's little consistency in those locations. A big point we don't know the answer to is we're considering at what correct spatial scale these effects are operating. So is it like we sort of mapped at a very sub-meter level? Is it a building or is it an urban block? So I guess we're not measuring everything. So we're not measuring noise. And if someone is looking at a tree or a building or a big, let's say, street or square, those are different spatial scales, and the influences might come from almost immeasurable things. So like if we were in a neighborhood where we felt worried or unsafe, that might be operating at a bigger scale than the tree that we're looking at, for example. And that was quite complicated. So right, I think I'll stop there. I'm sorry I've run over by 5 minutes, but I'd be very interested to hear how people respond to what I've said. And I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing so we can see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clive. That was fascinating and so relevant for a lot of, see a few hands there, so relevant for a lot of the work that we're doing.